أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My very dear brothers and sisters, all the listeners in Australia, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. From a sunny UK, it's 11 o'clock in the morning here, and I understand that most of you have broken your fast, alhamdulillah, and inshallah now resting. So I better not take you through something very deep, even though the topic that has been allocated to me, community challenges, will require some reflection on part of all of us because of the word challenges in that. But inshallah we learn that challenges is nothing to be worried about. Challenges are part and parcel of our life and growing. First of all, very quickly, a couple of words about myself. My name is Farooq Murad. I know you see there Sheikh written. I have no official claim to be a Sheikh, even though last 35 years I've been involved in education and teaching Islam, especially to young people, but community in general. And I also conduct Jummah prayers quite often here at the Islamic Foundation. And some of you might have read books from the Islamic Foundation. We are one of the largest publishers on Islam in English language. And I am currently based at the foundation, our beautiful campus here of 9.3 acres. Alhamdulillah, we have a publishing house here. We have an institute of higher education called Markfield Institute of Higher Education, looking at developing young scholars for our growing communities. And also we have a conference center here, and we have other library, a purpose-built unique library, one of the largest libraries on Islam in Europe, I would say, with 40,000 plus books. We have a nice introduction on YouTube. If you click Islamic Foundation, Leicester, 47 years, you will get the history established back in 1973 by a very illustrious figure on Islamic work and Islamic dawah, Islamic economics, Professor Khurshid Ahmad. I'm currently have the honor of being the CEO of this institute here, and this is what we do. And we, as a result, come across the issues confronting our communities, and therefore I can share some of my reflections or from that experience, inshallah. I pray you all are having wonderful Ramadan. I'm not sure how much are you locked in currently in Australia, but we are pretty much locked in. But I hope that this solitude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, a test and a trial that He has putting us through, it helps us to develop new insights, time again for reflection in Ramadan, digging deeper in the Quran. As great poet of Urdu poet Allama Iqbal said, that we should dive into the Quran. Wata zanho Quran mein. So we get that opportunity because quite often when Ramadan comes, we are busy, and Ramadan passes, we're just about able to read Nazra or finish the Quran. But I think it's a good opportunity to dig deep because we will learn so much, so many parallels about where we are today. It's not a new historical event that we are going through. Similar tests, trials, plagues have hit the world and humanity before, and there is a sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we learn. And as a result, we will develop new insights and fresh energy, inshallah. And if Allah permits, and inshallah He does, His mercy prevails, we will be able to have the opportunities to inshallah do better and deserve his promises of success and victory, inshallah. Let me move to the challenges now. I can see time is running fast. First of all, the word challenges. Whenever we mention the word challenges, we see it as something negative, an uphill road ahead and struggle ahead. But actually, challenge is a very positive thing in life. You know, when we're born, from that moment when we learn to walk, we fall many times. It's a very challenging thing to do, to learn to walk, but we do, and we continue to walk. No one ever falls down and stops walking. We get up and we continue to walk. And with all other aspects of life, whether it's earning a livelihood, developing a family, managing relationships, all of that is challenging. So challenges is a positive thing. It's through challenges that we build our lives. It's through challenges that we create history. And it's through challenges that we build inner resilience, capacity, and strength that makes us wonderful human beings, subhanAllah. And it is also, as I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise when he says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. See how beautiful. The first part says that certainly, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, the format of Arabic here says, we will test you again and again, and certainly test you. مِنَ الْخَوْفِ, the situation of fear, as many of us are facing today. وَالْجُوعِ, and hunger. وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ, loss of wealth and property and money, as we are seeing economies are in free fall. Well, anfus, and lives, as we are seeing, and we see again loss of, through death of relatives and near and dear ones and people, loss of life. Wathamarat, and crops and businesses. But in the same verse, Allah is actually saying something as serious as that, as all of these things will come. The word wabashir comes, which is quite amazing. That, but give good news in the same verse towards the end, wabashir sabirin, and give good news to the steadfast. Steadfast meaning who will live through and deal through these situations and do the right things. So today, and again, I was reflecting on one verse in Surah Al-Ankabut, Surah number 29, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, every soul, kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut, and then you'll be returned to us, and give good news of a paradise to the ones who do, who believe and do the righteous things, and says, وَالنِّعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ, how wonderful a ni'mah, a reward, a blessing for amilin. The word amilin, and many of you know Urdu. Amil in Urdu has other meanings as well, but amil means doer, the one who do, who act, the one who act, are amilin. So when ni'ma ajrul amilin, how wonderful a reward for the amilin, and then immediately describe the key qualities of amilin. What does it say? الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. They are the ones who remain steadfast, remain patient, which means that amilin work through challenging situations. And عَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, and upon the Lord they place their trust. They build expectations upon the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and know that He has planned nothing for us except that we should achieve our destiny, our goal of success and goodness in this dunya and the world in the akhirah. So challenges are what we have to confront, and we have to do that with all of these intentions, that this is through challenges through sabr, to developing our capacity, that we will achieve the real promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will open the doors to what He has kept in His hand, which we aspire, which is that we have dignity, we have victory, we have success, we can live and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with freedom, and we can achieve Jannah, which is the key goal in through all of this. Now, when we say community challenges, of course, I'm going to focus on communities like Muslims in Australia, communities which have grown of Muslim minorities in Western Australia can also be considered a country with the Western ideals and system and values and views. So we are looking at what are the challenges for communities like these. And these communities have grown mainly over the last 50 years. It's a new phenomenon. In the last 50 years, 50 years ago, for example, in Britain, I would say we were negligible, maybe a few thousand at most. And today we are estimated to be a community of almost 5 million, maybe 3.5 to 4 million was the figure at the census 10 years ago. The new census that will happen next year in 2021 is estimated our figures could be anywhere between 4.5, 5 million. And census does not pick up the whole figure exactly because many people do not answer that question. So we are looking at communities like ours who have grown in the last 50 years, mainly through economic migration, and then births, and partially through conversion of locals joining into Islamic community by converting to Islam or reverting to Islam, whichever term you prefer. So I'm looking at these communities. What are the challenges facing? I'm going to talk about, in the time left, very quickly, what I consider to be the 5 major challenges that we face. And in that order, the order in which I'm going to talk about, to me, that are the key macro challenges. And there are sub challenges that we can all work out in our specific situations as to what they may be for Australia, and maybe for us in Britain, or for Muslims maybe listening from America or anywhere else. But I will focus on 5 broad macro challenges that face us. The first one, I have called it finding purpose. Now, even for our own lives as individuals, quite often when you read the success literature, they talk about finding your purpose, your mission, your calling, what that is. Because once we can connect to that, we can do so much better. So as a community, finding our key purpose is a major challenge. Otherwise, time just runs and we are individuals, we cannot become it. It's a purpose, a common goal, a common purpose, a common mission that makes something a group, a community. So we, the Muslims of Australia, who have come at different times from different places with different issues and agenda, if a common purpose can be shared, can be promoted, can be learned, and can gather people, or at least in our conscience can be implanted in our living, then we will draw a lot more direction, and its purpose gives direction, and also priorities, values, issues, where we should spend our time and money, what we should learn and not learn, where we should do what. So all of that comes from learning the purpose. And to me, that remains the first major challenge. Now, I can say a few things that will help us to focus on what that can be. Now, arrival of Muslims in these new lands can be seen as an accident of history. That, there was economic problems in many of Muslim countries, obviously post Second World War, post colonization. Many countries left economic doldrums and poverty and so on, and there were better opportunities in these countries. After Second World War, European countries needed labor. So there was a kind of, you can give a sociological interpretation to how Muslims have began to arrive, and within 30, 40 years, the landscape for Islam has changed. We have now 2,000 mosques in Britain, so there's a growing community, and it is still continuing to grow. So we can see it like that. But what I was talking at the beginning about reflecting deeper in the Quran in this month of Ramadan, if we do that, we'll be struck by one thing. And that is, whilst many issues of details of religion and fiqh and salah and zakah and fasting were all left by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were not written clearly in the Quran. As a result, we have many fiqhs and many opinions which exist as to what it should be, have always existed. But what is termed as the book of Hidayah that makes this month so great, the whole value of this month of Ramadan comes from the fact that Quran was revealed in it. Shahr Ramadan allazi unzila fihi al-Quran. The whole value of Laylatul Qadr, which is better than 1,000 months, is Quran was revealed. So this is because of the guidance that it contains is invaluable. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to be invaluable guidance in this book are stories of migrations, of people migrating, individuals migrating, through that communities migrating. Hijrah. But significant in those to me are stories of Musa alayhi salam, story of Yusuf alayhi salam, story of Yunus alayhi salam. They are quite significant. Each one of them actually carries huge messages for us to help us discover our purpose. What is the story? At the time, the stories for these individuals would have been very simple. And that is, Musa alayhi salam, there was a kind of, call it racial Islamophobia against people of Bani Israel. The authorities of the time had decided to purge this community, kill their male children, and it was a big test. And so that's what was happening. Persecution, a kind of Holocaust had been declared against the Bani Israel. And one mother has inspiration, of course, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at that time, an inspiration to, out of desperation, to save her baby, and decides to let the baby go into River Nile. But as we know now the story, this was a divine plan, that how this baby should end up from a place of insignificance, almost facing existential threat, destined to be killed, to the place of influence and power, the court, the royal court of Pharaoh. And then how that should give that person opportunity to learn about influence and power and be part of that influential system. Yusuf alayhi salam, again, there was a domestic jealousy between brothers in a far off, insignificant land where they were. His father had guidance, of course, he was one of the prophets, Yaqub alayhi salam, but they were tending a flock of sheep and so on. They were living in a significant area. And then from there, but through this jealousy, that he was thrown into a pit, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes him forward to the court of Aziz, and eventually by establishing his character, by establishing his wisdom through interpretation of the dream, and therefore having the solution to the problems of his society, major economic problems of society. He is able to come to a position of control and influence. So I see in these stories, if we dig deep, that there is a pattern, a tradition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He takes people who have guidance from places of insignificance to place of significance. And I think Muslims coming into many Western countries brings them into that place to do good. And that is the purpose and mission, that, the key quality when we say Muslim or Muslim communities, that we have Islam. And the key definition of Islam is that Islam is not for us. Islam is for humanity. It's the amana of humanity that we hold in our hands. And Allah wants this amana to be shared. This amana to ease people's problems and difficulties in their lives. And this is the key purpose, that it is reinforced in the Quran when Quran talks about كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. You are the best of communities brought out for mankind, that you command to what is right and what is just, and you forbid what is wrong. So this is the key purpose, that I think we need to see how we, in our conscience, more and more people can begin to discuss and see that as a community with that responsibility, what can we do? And therefore we will find through that, inshallah, ideas how we can make a major difference and find a major purpose that gives us a sense of a community and a unity, and able to contribute. And it is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in tansurullah yansurukum wa yuthabbit aqdamakum, that if we worry about being insecure and facing Islamophobia and all these challenges, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you take my cause in your hand, then I will. In tansurullah means taking his cause in our hands and helping his cause. And that is his cause, that his message should reach humanity, that if you take this cause in your hands, he will help you. He will help you, and yuthabbit aqdamakum, and establish your feet firmly on the ground. We find ourselves rooted into the ground better. One of the things we can do, and I learned this because my introduction to this lecture, my father, Allah yarhamhu, Ustaz Farooq Murad, has been mentioned. One of the things I learned, I remember many, many years ago, sitting in one of the programs that was held at the Islamic Foundation, and we were young in those days. I'm talking in mid-80s, and we used to gather to learn from him. And he, one afternoon, I remember vividly that he was talking about as to how we can solve this problem of bringing the Ummah to the realization of its purpose. And he said, quite often you can have a beautiful machine, a vehicle, and everything's there. Take the example of a car. I've got a car in front of me here outside, I can see. So you can have a car, and it has petrol, it has engine, it has lovely seats, you can imagine everything, but it doesn't start, doesn't work. If it doesn't start, doesn't work, it's useless. It's of no value. If it doesn't start and can take you from this destination to another destination, then it's very much a surplus, unrequired item, a piece of item. So he was saying that, this ummah seemed to be lacking that drive and energy, and it seemed not to be doing its job. And quite often when a vehicle like this is not working, it's something, everything is there, but maybe a wire that connects the fuel pipe to the engine is disconnected, or some other wiring issues. So disconnection of something is there perhaps. And he talked about 3 disconnections which happens in people like Muslims. And because of those disconnections, we become impotent and we begin to suffer, and we are not able to contribute to the world either. And he talked about those three connections or links that we should explore, how through our meetings and lectures and talks and education we can rebuild. We rebuild those connections, we will rediscover our energy and our drive. So first when he said was between Iman and Amal. This is the first major connection. Iman, amanu wa amilu salihat. That one of the major things prophets did in their key programs is to connect Iman with Amal. Iman without Amal is useless. So we can be Muslim, but without that Amal, living for that purpose, we can highlight this point that we are not really truly honoring our Iman. And this was Iman was about test and trial. Quran says again and again that only those are sadiq, ulaikum sadiqun, those who fulfill those duties. They are only those are truthful. This is used quite a lot in the Quran. Who are truthful in their claim to Islam? Those who do amal, and amal sometimes require meant struggle, sometimes meant jihad, sometimes meant giving money to the poor, sometimes meant bearing through tests and trials, and praying and doing good and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. So that's the first link, Iman and Amal. That has become weak because nowadays one can be legally, and we are. Everyone is a Muslim who says kalima, but for us to be true in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and deserving of His mercy, we need to look at Amal. And within the categories of Amal, one of the major Amal is this mission and purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the guidance that we brought should be shared, the society in which we live. The second link he talked about was the link between life and worship, ibadah. Now, when we talk about ibadah, naturally we think of the 5 pillars. We think of salah and zakah and fasting and shahada to declare faith is one of the pillars, but we mainly think of the practical ibadat which are in those 5 pillars. But ibadah, as we know, is whole life for Muslims. Even getting married is an act of ibadah, earning a livelihood in halal way is an act of ibadah, teaching our children and caring for them is an act of ibadah, and taking care of our elderly is an act of ibadah, and being kind to our neighbors is an act of ibadah. Everything, the whole life is ibadah. Whole life can be ibadah. Sleeping is an ibadah, getting up is an ibadah. So this connection also broken. We've got this traditional religious view of ibadah, worship. Is worship are those acts. But if we understand ibadah is a whole life, then we bring the whole life to live in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And third link, very important link, is between Islam and society. Islam is for individuals and is for society. If you look at and analyze the Quran, there's some instructions to individuals, but even individuals have been addressed as communities. Even us Muslims have been addressed, not, "Oh, you Muslim," but, "Oh, you who believe, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu," because we are part of a society. So Islam has a deep interest in what happens in society. If there are injustices in society, it becomes a duty to speak about those injustices. If there's a wrong in society, we should do that, talk about them and do something about it. There's hadith about it, that if you see wrong, try to change it with your hand, if not, that your tongue, if not, then at least consider it as wrong, and that is perhaps the weakest. Iman, and after that there is no iman. You can lose the distinction of right and wrong. So this is the other link that we need to be established, because now we see society. Islam is my private affair, is between me and my Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just live my own Islam, I perform my prayer, but I'm not able to connect that Islam and have no interest in to see what Islam says about the society in which we live and what we have to do about trying to bring the goodness of Islam to society. And society means societal structures, societal policies and programs and law, and everything becomes part of society. And as Muslims, as a community, if we have better solutions, we should do our best remaining within the law to see how we can bring those ideas in the discussion of society and allowing and enabling society to benefit from it and not withholding it back. إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون. Such an indictment against people. It says, إن الذين يكتمون, verily those who cover and hide the guidance they have been given and are not and do not make it known after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it known to mankind, then there's condemnation of them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and wrath of those who send wrath to these people. So this is the three links that we should perhaps reflect to see how we can strengthen that sense of purpose in our consciousness. I think that's a major first challenge. My second challenge I picked up is the intellectual challenge. We live in a knowledge-based economies, as they say, societies, the dominant worldview that in which society is democratic, liberal, Western, secular societies of which we are part of. There is a worldview there. And it's a life that has been shaped, obviously, by making God redundant from that life. And that's not the main show. Religion and God is not the main show. It's a side show. It's a personal show. But it's not the show that is running things, an education system through which we live through, an economic system to which we contribute and participate in. But that's what we are part of. And intellectually, that poses a challenge in the sense that we need to see and explore in the world of ideas that how our faith actually can enhance that life, can actually is valuable, can contribute, and can provide ethical foundations for a more just society. And when it comes to Islam, it's even more maligned and marginalized. It is actually in the common media, press, and narrative, the dominant narrative. Islam is actually, especially the last 20 years since 9/11 and so on, has been even condemned more as being a religion of extremism, of terrorism, a religion of violence, and religion which deprive women of their rights, and so on and so forth, of underachievement, anti-progress, anti-West, all of these. And we need to demolish all of these wrong perceptions about Islam. And that's an intellectual challenge. That misunderstanding about it has to be removed, and the gap and divide that has come in, the wedge between us and the wider society in which we live, that needs to be closed. And also to see how we can make Islam more appealing and relevant. And that itself is a task that we have brought Islam, which is a whole cultural baggage as well from the countries where we live. But Islam, as we know, initial history of Islam, wherever it went, it was able to have its own expression in the new cultures it went. So we had Islamic architecture, for example, even we look at, is different from a Malaysian mosque to an Indian mosque to an Arab mosque to an Iranian mosque, which shows that even at the architecture level, food level, and so on and so forth, Islam developed a local expression of its, and we should allow as community, and that will come to intellectual work, how we can translate Islam into our new settings and new times and new situation, and give it that intellectual foundations, and that requires new literature, new scholarship. But I think that is a major, because you see, when we study Quran, we see when the prophets came, they dealt with the challenges thrown at them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to those arguments. Many of arguments are the same old arguments, but they will need to be responded in new language and new time to make it to enable us, and especially our future generation, our young children and future generation, who would ask those many questions because they are living in those societies and imbibing their systems and education, where they will actually also begin to see religion and Islam and God as it is seen in the dominant view of the society. So we will need to make a good intellectual case for Islam. Third challenge that I have chosen for the community is how to become force for good and seen as force for good. That's the word I'd use, force for good, for contribution. That we are not just fighting to preserve and protect ourselves and find a little corner, but we actually come out and have an external outreach to the society and become force for good. And this again we learn from Seerah of Rasulullah, that he was Sadiq and Amin, which means a force for good, but he also contributed to campaigns for justice. For example, a famous incident from those who know Seerah is of Hilf al-Fudul, the pact that was made by some Meccans, and Prophet contributed to it, in which the idea of that pact was that I'll continue till for 45 minutes, by the way, and then allow last 15 minutes for question answer, inshallah. So I've got another 9 minutes to cover two more challenges. I'm on the third challenge, force for good. Let's get back to Hilful Qudul, the pact our beloved Prophet made. And at the time when traders used to come from far off lands, and sometimes one trader, one poor person who brought goods to Mecca, and he was shortchanged. He was not given his money, and basically the influential Meccan powerful leaders said, we're not paying you to do whatever you want to do. And in those days, there is no protection as such. Even now, perhaps in new lands, an ajnabi, a stranger, would struggle. So he was left in that very vulnerable situation, and some people decided to help him, and they approached Rasulullah, and he joined that pact to protect vulnerable traders who came to Makkah, and he was very proud of standing for these vulnerable people. And in fact, later on in his life, our beloved Prophet he said in the days in Medina, I read that he said that if there was such an alliance to be made, even at that time, bringing diverse group of people to stand for something right and just, he would do that. So that's something we should look at as communities. If there are alliances, possibility of working together with other people for things which are of common values, as Quran says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, and to ta'awun on what is right, what is just, what is more God conscious, then we should explore that. And the values of ma'ruf, the values of equality, justice, and all of these are agendas, rights of the vulnerable people, particularly the homeless and unemployed. And we should look at it. If we do an analysis of Meccan surahs, we will find that in Mecca, it was the rights of the yatim and rights of the slaves, which was very, very important in Islamic program, Islamic message. And in fact, Iman was connected, like as well Ma'un, that is mentioned so many times, that they were not people who denied their judgment, are those who deny and do not encourage people to give food and feed the orphans and miskin. So this is the value of Islam, and we need to live it. And that's the challenge, as a third challenge. How, as community, as Muslim community, we can become torchbearer, and we can become the leaders in doing things for the underprivileged. And it should reflect in our organizational budgets as well, that within that, how much are we doing to encourage that. And the fourth challenge is that of communication and media. It's all about communication quite often. And we are not very good at it generally. And because we don't invest in it, our organizations don't invest in it, we should see how we can be more effective in communication. We are the uh, followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Sunnah was he communicated. Rasul, that's in fact it was such a major Sunnah of Rasul that he's remembered by that name. Rasul, he was Rasul. He communicated, and says, "Wama alayna illa al-balagh." And upon us there is nothing but to communicate. And we need to learn effective communication. Communication means understanding our audience, their psyche, their issues, a wider British or Australian or American or European society, whichever society we as a community are living. How much have we tried to understand their worldview, their perceptions, their sensitivities? All of this needs to be learned, and then we need to see how we can make them understand our sensitivities, our views, what we stand for, so they don't misunderstand us, that we actually stand to deprive women of their rights, so we don't actually are against progress, against social, economic, family progress, and so on, or for justice, or we are against killing of anyone unjustly, completely. So all of these values is all the gap of communication that requires investment. You see, we have like we all live in our own little worlds, and begin to frame our own opinions about the other and about ourselves. It's not how we look at ourselves. It's not how others look at us. Also, we need to pay attention to. And the fifth challenge is for our communities is to what I will call self-preservation and protection and defense. And this I put at the last. Quite often, this is much more important for us, but I've put it right towards the end. And that is how to unite the Muslim, because we come from different parts of the world and we have obviously different languages, different fiqh that we have, but there are common issues for us as Muslims. And they're so common that we can make a very broad camp of people. And we should look at how we should help to frame laws which are just and equal for all, how the policies of the government, which others I'm talking about, is to create the political weight and voice that we are able to defend our just rights and are able to ensure that we have that protection that is for halal food, the ability to run our mosque, and the ability to implement our education system. So on all of those matters, as well as for the wider society, we should look at self-preservation, protection. Now, all of these are broad challenges, and I would say to conclude, uh, just to summarize very quickly, the first challenge was enabling the community to find a common purpose and mission, and I presented that it should be nothing other than, and on that depends our long-term success, is that we become ambassadors of the message of Islam in our society. As a community, we are ambassadors of Islam. And that is only very few people are conscious of it or practice it. But I think we should try to share that wider community by sharing ideas such as life is ibadah, such as Islam is for society, such as Iman is, there's no Iman without Amal, and one of the major Amal is that of sharing this message. Second, I talk about intellectual challenges we face. For that, we should see how we should develop institutions, and we are like one of the institutions who have taken that challenge. We've published 400 books, and we are trying to enter mainstream Islamic literature and program and ideas and thoughts, and should have more discussion, not just learn what's been said and repeat, but we should try to also look at our new situation, how we can uh, patch the gap between modern liberal secular society of which we are members of. And third was trying to become a contributing community, becoming force for good, what contribution we can make to society, its problems and ill. And fourth was communication and media expertise we need to develop within ourselves. And fifth was a united forum that we should create to articulate our issues of our rights and protection of Muslim rights. Exactly 45 minutes I see on the clock on my screen here, so I'll close. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. I'll wait for any questions that you may have, inshallah. The first question I can read here is how do you cater for different ideologies and practices that various ethnicities bring when accommodating for the Muslim when accommodating for the Muslim community? That's the first question that has been sent. Now that is itself a challenge. We talk about challenge the Muslim community is the fact that we have. I'm not sure about Australia, but I'm probably it's not too different to the situation in Britain. That I sometimes say that in Britain is a micro ummah. The whole ummah can be found in Britain and within the 4 million Muslims. Now, many of our people who come from like Turkey, Pakistan, or Bangladesh, they have been brought up and learned our Islam only one way. We think Islam is only that one way that was taught by our parents and it's practiced in our countries, and there's no others anything else than seen as a deviation. And therefore, we come with this very narrow view of Islam. I think that can only be patched through education and through understanding that historically Islam is a very rich Islam. There's a diversity and there's unity in diversity. But as I was saying, as one of the fifth challenges is to build that unity. It happens when we, and this is our experience in Britain, when we created those forums such as Muslim Council of Britain, which I also have the privilege to be part of and even lead in the past, is that not we were able to develop and understand that what unites us is a lot more than what divides us. And it was fascinating. It enriched my faith to work with people of different ideas and even learn from people of different ideas. We should never rule out that possibility either. We can learn a lot of new things. Islam is a rich fabric in which, and we also understand that many of those viewpoints were developed for different cultural settings. This also allows us perhaps together to bring all those different interpretations and practices to see how we can develop even new expression, which I was talking about earlier, for our society. So it is about education, about coming together, finding least common denominator. People would come together for least common denominator. If we talked about an issue that affects everybody, people would come together. And when we live together, we will develop that capacity, inshallah. I'll wait for the next question unless there's some technical problem that I'm not seeing any further questions here.